you. Okay, at 5 o'clock, I will call the Quality of Life Committee meeting for August 4th to order. We do have a couple committee members who will not be joining us tonight. So Jennifer, if you could call the roll, that would be great.
Sure. Counselor Jamie Cassett.
She's excused.
Counselor Michael Garcia.
Present.
Counselor Chris Rivera.
Here.
Councilwoman Renee Villarreal.
She's also excused.
And Chair Carol Romero Worth.
I am here. Do we have changes to the agenda tonight from staff?
None from staff today, Madam Chair.
All right, any from the committee?
Move for approval.
Do we have a second?
Second.
So we have a motion by Councilor Rivera, a second by Councilor Garcia to approve the agenda for tonight as is. If we could get a roll call on that as well.
Counselor Michael Garcia.
Yes.
Counselor Chris Rivera.
Yes.
Chair Carol Romero Worth.
Yes. The consent agenda, are there changes to the consent agenda?
None from staff.
Okay. And are there items that the committee would like to discuss tonight? Councilor Garcia, for some reason, my computer is not showing hands raised. I don't know if that's, there we go, found it. All right. Councilor Garcia, did you have your hand up? I'm sorry.
No, I didn't.
Okay, all right. I don't see anything that the committee would like to pull.
Sorry, Madam Chair. Just briefly, item E.
Item E, okay. Item E, request for approval of FY22 police vehicle purchase. All right, is there a motion on the consent agenda?
Move for approval as amended.
Second.
We have a motion to approve the consent agenda. Jennifer, can you call the roll?
Counselor Chris Rivera.
Yes.
Counselor Michael Garcia.
Yes.
And Chair Carol Romero Worth.
Yes. All right, so our consent agenda is approved. We will go to, let's see, I got to do the minutes. I always forget that. Approval of the minutes from July 21st. Are there changes from staff to those minutes?
No changes to the minutes, but I did want to apologize for missing the amendment on the action sheet 2 weeks ago. That's been corrected. Thank you, Jesse, for doing that. But the minutes should have that reflected.
Okay, great. And do we have a motion or changes and then a motion from the counselors?
Move for approval of the minutes.
Second.
We have a motion from Councilor Rivera to approve the minutes, a second from Councilor Garcia. Can we take a roll call on that?
Counselor Michael Garcia.
Yes.
Counselor Chris Rivera.
Yes.
Chair Carol Romero Worth.
Yes. All right, so the only item that was pulled from the consent agenda is item E, request for FY22. Oops, let's see, hold on. Here we go. FY22 police vehicle purchase request in the total amount of $1,155,371.32 for vehicles, equipment, and labor costs associated with each vehicle. And I think we have somebody, Deputy Chief Valdez, you're here, right? And Councilor Rivera, you have the floor.
Chief Valdez, thank you. And first, thank you for finding a hybrid vehicle. I assume this is the Ford Interceptor that will be used on a daily basis out in the streets. Is that correct?
Madam Chair, Councilor Rivera, yes, sir. The Interceptor vehicle will be utilized by our patrol fleet.
All right, great. That's great to hear. And what type of, since it's a hybrid, it uses fuel as well as batteries, is that correct?
Yes, Counselor Rivera.
All right, so what's the charging method or what's the fueling method for this? And do you have those readily available?
Counselor Rivera, because it's a hybrid engine, the way that you fuel the vehicles with conventional fuel, and as the vehicle is utilized, it regenerates power. So either through idling or through braking, that regenerates and charges up the batteries. And that's a great benefit for us because as our officers are driving around, that battery's getting charged up. And once they need to idle, the fuel engine turns off and then it switches over to electric power. And then it just kicks on to idle when it needs to recharge that battery if it's sitting for a duration. We have a number of these vehicles in our fleet right now. We are seeing the benefits from it. We're very excited about it. But pretty much what we've seen is patrol vehicles that would otherwise get somewhere between 8 to 12 miles per gallon in the city. They're realizing 20 miles per gallon from that hybrid engine. The other benefit are these vehicles are pursuit rated and equipped to be utilized as a patrol vehicle. We have a number of administrative vehicles like the Ford Fusion hybrid that we've been fielding since about 2015 or 16. So we know the benefits are there, but what's great is the platform exists for the vast majority of the needs of the patrol fleet.
And how long are the batteries rated for? I know older vehicles, the batteries are rated for 7 years. How long are these ones rated for?
Councilor Rivera, that was one thing that we went to look into with our Fusions. And from our first batch of Fusions we got in 2015-16, we have yet to have to replace the lithium batteries in those vehicles. The battery that you have in a conventional engine, we've had to replace those just through wear. But for us, that was our big concern with going to a hybrid vehicle was the need to replace those batteries. So we're getting to a point with that first batch of hybrids where we're actually seeing where it's coming up to the time for replacement before we had to replace the battery. So that's been a good benefit for us, but we're going to continue to evaluate it because the admin vehicles, they serve in the field in a different manner than our patrol vehicles. So that's yet to be seen. We're still looking to see what the replacement schedule is going to look like on those batteries. But as of right now, we anticipate them lasting the entire service time of that patrol vehicle.
Thank you. And then what are the Ford Expeditions going to be used for?
Councilor Rivera, those Expeditions are going to be utilized for our police canine units. Currently, we have them in the police interceptor utilities. The two that we have are the non-hybrid units that we have. And the challenge we've seen with those ones is it doesn't have the space and capacity to carry both the kennel for the police service dog and all the other associated equipment with it. So with a bigger platform, it's gonna allow us to do that. They don't currently offer that platform in a hybrid platform. If not, we would have explored that to see if that would have been something we could have done. The good benefit though is it does have a V6 EcoBoost engine and a 10-speed automatic, which also yields it a greater fuel savings versus our current 2013 to 2019 Explorers and Tauruses.
Okay, and then the F-250?
Councilor Rivera, the F-250 is going to be utilized by our animal services officers. Their fleet in the grand scheme of things is probably the most worn fleet that we have right now. Their trucks, we have to get to 3/4 ton because they need the capability to be able to pull a horse trailer that we have in the event someone's horses get loose, but also it has a capacity for that kennel as well. So those F-250s are being utilized for animal services officers.
So does this one come with a kennel or is that ordered separately?
Councilor Rivera, we had to purchase it as equipment that's going to be installed, and it's a kennel that's made mostly out of aluminum, and it has the equipment to be able to transport animals safely and also maintain their green equipment.
All right, one last question. The picture behind you is, I think, one of the police packages you have now with color of the vehicle and the striping and all that. Are these vehicles matching what's behind you now?
Councilor Rivera, that's a great question. So the two vehicles in my background are our latest police hybrid utility vehicles. So these two that are behind me are the ones that we are requesting for our patrol section in the same color scheme that is shown on the background.
All right, I have seen some vehicles out there that have the detailing package or the sticker package that's all black, which matches the vehicle. I'm not very fond of those vehicles, so I want to make sure that what we're buying now is going to match what's behind you today.
And Councilor Rivera, I agree with you on that. I'm not a big fan of those, they call them ghost graphics. If we have those units out there, we want them to be highly visible. So as we get through this year, we're finishing up the transition. We have maybe 3 to 5 black and white units. Once those decals are done, the vehicles with the ghost graphics, we are going to redecal them with the same color scheme you see on these vehicles, because they're used for DUI enforcement and traffic enforcement. We want them to be highly visible. We want it to be a deterrent for people to, not drive over the speed limit. We want it to be visible. So I'm not a big fan of the ghost graphics. If it's a police car and it's out there doing its thing and it has decals on it, we want it to be highly visible.
I agree with you. Thank you, Chief. Appreciate it.
Yes, sir. You're welcome.
Any other questions from the committee? And
I'll
if
move
not,
for
is there a
approval.
motion?
Second.
We have a motion from Councilor Rivera, a second from Councilor Garcia to approve the purchase of these vehicles. Jennifer, can we get a roll call?
Counselor Chris Rivera,
Yes.
Counselor Michael Garcia,
Yes.
Chair Carol Romero Worth.
Yes. All right, so with that, we are through our consent agenda. We have no action items this evening. We do have 2 presentations. And the first one is a wildfire preparedness presentation from Porfirio Chavarria. And I believe he's been promoted. Yep, there he is. Porfirio, did you have somebody else who was going to be with you tonight, or are you going to take this on your own?
Councilor Romero, Brian Williams is here and he is going to present his slide. He has a slide deck that he's going to go, and he's going to begin our presentation and then participate in the meeting.
Terrific. And I just also want to give a quick shout out to Jim Harrington with Common Cause, who joined our meeting. He's in the attendee room, and he was here for an item that we passed on consent. So Jim, just wanted to let you know, thank you for coming, and we'll see you at the Bill's next stop. So Brian, with that, if you're ready, we're ready.
All right, councilors, good evening. Let me do a quick screen share and should be able to. Okay, can you see our presentation?
I think we can.
Excellent. So as Porf mentioned, it's myself and Porf will be tag teaming this presentation. I'm going to start with the scary stuff since I'm Mr. Gloom and Doom. And then Porf is going to work on the wildfire history and some of the things that the fire department is doing now. And then at the end of the presentation, we've got some suggestions to talk about, and then we'll take questions. Oh, darn it. Let's see, get to go back. So wildfire is obviously an integral part of the ecology of the Southwest, including the Santa Fe area. We know fires are going to continue to occur. Well, with climate change, expanding residential areas in the wilderness wildland interface, and expanding forest users all will contribute to an increasing threat of wildfire in the Santa Fe area. What we know about global climate change and its impact on wildfire: there will be more fires. The fires will be larger. Since 2000, it shifts from the scrublands to burning conifers, large trees. They're expected to further stress our aging, deteriorating infrastructure. The smoke from the wildfires certainly impact outdoor recreational activities and vulnerable populations in our community. The wildfires on rangelands are expected to disrupt agriculture and productivity. And increased wildfire activity is expected to decrease the U.S. ability to support the forest to support economic activity, including recreation and subsistence activities. As you can see, with temperatures rising, what we will see is the snow will melt sooner, which in turn will lead to drier forests, which will then lead to more fire more easily ignited, and fires burning hotter, which will ultimately damage the soil more dramatically. And then I'm going to pass the baton to Porfirio and let him talk a little bit about the wildfire history. Porf,
Excellent. Hi, Brian. Can you hear me?
we can.
Excellent. So fire history, just in and around Santa Fe. In 2011, we had the Las Conchas fire, 156,000 acres. And this was across the valley on the Jemez Mountains in 2011. At the time, it was the largest fire in New Mexico's history. At the same time of that fire in 2011, we had the Pacheco fire, which was about 10 miles north of the city. It was about 10,000 acres. In a couple years after that, 2013, we had the Jaroso fire and the Tres Lagunas fire, each around 10,000 acres. In 2016, we had the McClure fire, which was 7 acres, which is a little deceiving because of how small it is. But that was in the watershed. It was in the wilderness portion of the watershed, just east of McClure. And the reason it's only 7 acres is the Forest Service and first responders attacked that fire with as fast as they could. We sent 4 hotshot crews to it. That's 4 times 20. That's 80 people, plus about 7 aircraft that dropped, retardant and other things on it and kept it at 7 acres. Then in 2020, last year, in August and September, which is rare and not typical, but we didn't receive the monsoon rains that we're receiving this year. And we had an 4,000 acre fire, about 5 miles north of the city, certainly traveling towards the city, and certainly has impacted those communities that are downstream of that, Medio and Chupadero. That the significance of that fire was that it's in the Pacheco Canyon project area that the Forest Service is conducting right now, where they're doing fuels reduction project, thinning it, making it more resilient. And in fact, one of their 500 acre blocks that they had burned with a prescribed fire the previous fall helped them make some of those control lines and really aided the incident management team that arrived to make decisions on how to corral that fire and aided their tactics and strategies that kept that fire at 4,000 acres. And then this year in 2021, we had the Rincon fire, which is kind of on the other side of the main ridge of the Sangre de Cristos on the Pecos Canyon side. And that fire was 500 acres. So I want to kind of step back a little bit, but this is the National Cohesive Wildland Fire Management Strategy that's kind of been implemented over the last 5 years. Stakeholders include all the federal agencies, all states, and some local governments in developing this plan to address wildland fire. And there's 3 tenets to this. Resilient landscapes. So those are those fuels reduction projects, trying to make our forests more resilient for fire. As you may know, ponderosa pine, which is the main vegetation type, main forest type, is really adapted to fire, wants fire to run through it. we haven't had that frequent fire. And so we want to make those landscapes back to that resilience so that we can have fire pretty frequently through those forests, and not devastating fires, but moderate to low intensity fires. The other tenet is fire adapted communities. And this is my main job on a day-to-day, is trying to create a fire adapted communities. That's a community that is aware of where they live and knows that fire is a natural process and that is needed is needed where they live, and know that there's going to be a fire at some point and are preparing for that event. They've they prepared their landscape, their structure is hardened and ready to resist fire, and that in the event of evacuation, they are prepared to do that. And these two steps really lead to creating a safe and effective wildfire response. This wildfire response is, what we do when we have a fire and how we get there. I mentioned those aircraft and those hotshot crews. Just like that, here in the city, we have 7 permanent employees for wildland fire. We're hiring 15 seasonals every year, and those are all thanks to the governing body. Those have been approved to be funded from the general fund. And that really helps us, though, when we do get a start, those resources can go and attack that fire as quickly as possible and reduce the amount of damage. It also helps to make that response safer, so that firefighters don't need to risk their lives in undue circumstances, and so that they can fight that fire safely and effectively. To help all of this is really partnerships. So the Greater Santa Fe Fireshed Coalition is an area that has been designated by the city and the county in resolutions of an area of importance. And basically it's from Glorieta all the way north to the ski basin. And as you can see on the map here, that blue circled area is the City of Santa Fe Municipal Watershed, and which provides 40% of the city's water and is really the heart of the fireshed. We wanted to think in the scale of large wildland fire. We saw what happened in Las Conchas. And so this is at that scale. Any large wildfire through here, we're certainly going to affect any of the downstream communities, from post-fire flooding effects, beyond just the direct effects of the actual flames burning, vegetation, homes, all the values that we love. Go ahead, Brian, you can. Our next is our mitigation programs that we provide for city home residents. We have home and property hazard assessments, wildfire mitigation agreements, fireshed ambassadors, and fuels reduction projects that we perform. So our hazard assessments, any person in the city of Santa Fe can give me a call. I'll go out there, walk around the property, and give them advice on what they can do to reduce their threat from wildfire. Essentially, it's 2 big things. Either embers are going to land around the property, around the house, and everywhere. And those could come from as far away as 1.5 miles, and as big as the size of your fist. And so if they land on something that starts on fire, is that going to start your house on fire? So things like wood piles, patio furniture, open windows, open doors, garage doors, anywhere where an ember could enter the home is certainly a vulnerability. And then also looking at the vegetation, because the other second way a fire is going to reach your house is the flames are going to get all the way to your house. And so looking at the vegetation and breaking up the continuity so that if a fire was burned a tree, wouldn't start the next tree on the fire, or it wouldn't get all the way to your house, to your portal, your deck, or to your home. Next. We have mitigation agreements through our crew that's been funded through the city. Those are labor share. And the way those work are we go out there, we assess the property, we come to an agreement with the property owner, and in that defensible space zone, we'll cut the trees, and then the homeowner is responsible for removing all the cut material. And so that's been pretty successful. We get about a dozen a year, some years more, some years less. Our Fire Shit Ambassador program. This is a neighbor-to-neighbor network. We're trying to empower community leaders in those neighborhoods to be informed on wildfire, what about the risks, evacuations, everything wildfire, so that they can communicate that to their neighbors and give them that information. And lots of times more people are more trusting from maybe an agency standpoint than they are willing to listen to their neighbor about how they can best protect their property and their community from a wildfire. This has been pretty successful. And with COVID, it's kind of been stepped back, but we're looking at reestablishing this and holding a large community wildfire event later on in next year for National Wildfire Preparedness Day, which is May 7th. Next. Oh, and there you are, Brian. That's pretty much my presentation. Those are things, and I'll be available for questions as we finish.
So, Madam Chair and councilors, what we'd like to offer is some ideas about action steps that you can take here at the local level. Also at the state, recommendations for state legislation and also for federal legislation, which all have impact on how this wildfire community works. Obviously, the most important thing is to improve community awareness and to build trust with the community. As Porford had pointed out, it's so important that community members trust us and trust the information that we're providing them to help guide their decision-making in order for them to protect the most important asset they have, which is their home. We urge you to continue to support forest health collaborations. We certainly urge the pursuit of efforts to reduce climate affecting emissions. We urge to pursue water conservation efforts. We urge you to commit funding to increase wildfire response capabilities. As the previous slide pointed out, there's likely to be more fires. The fires will burn hotter and more ferociously, and therefore we need to ensure that our response capability is keeping up with the demand. We suggest and commit funding to increasing the water supplies in the wildland interface area. Evaluate the need to improve building and zoning codes as they relate to wildland fire. And to anticipate the need for post-fire assistance to individuals and households. At the state level, many of these are parallel. The state obviously has its area of responsibilities. We encourage the city to promote legislation addressing climate change, legislation improving education and awareness of climate impacts, obviously legislation to improve emergency management, including wildfire response, legislation to improve forest health, and legislation to address drought impacts. At the federal level, where I think much of the most impactful actions take place, because the federal government owns the vast majority of fire risk lands, we urge support of any federal climate change treaties and initiatives, to support legislation regarding forest health and forest management projects, support an amendment to the Fire Management Assistance Grant, which currently provides 75% federal funding to state and local governments for the fire response and emergency management activities. However, it does not provide funding for post-fire flooding, which, if you've looked at the history of fire here in New Mexico, that's really what's causing the disasters. Las Conchas, the Little Bear Fire, all of these fires had tremendous post-fire flooding impacts, of which there wasn't any federal assistance to take emergency protective actions immediately within days after the fire was suppressed. And that funding wasn't available until the fire became a major disaster, a presidential level disaster. We obviously support legislation to increase the federal firefighting resources, including initial attack aircraft. This is critical to enable the firefighting community to get a handle on small fires to prevent them from becoming big fires. As Porfirio had pointed out, a small fire of 7 acres, because the assets and the resources were here, they were able to keep it at 7 acres. Without that firefighting aircraft, it becomes difficult for fire managers to put crews on the fire itself, and therefore they're forced to take a indirect strategy which allows the fire to become larger. So firefighting aircraft is very important in suppressing the most threatening fires. Of course, we urge your support of legislation to address drought impacts. And then I also suggest we promote legislation granting a tax credit for preparedness. Most of you will remember, or many of us will remember, back in the 70s when we faced the oil crisis, the energy crisis. The federal government did offer a tax credit for conservation and for fuel and for energy reductions, including weatherization and those types of things. It was an incredibly effective program. And I certainly would urge our federal legislators to consider legislation affording a tax credit for preparedness, which could include for wildfire things like chemicals which can be sprayed, fire retarding chemicals that can be sprayed on a coyote fence, fire retardant gels which might be able to be used to protect your structure, perhaps various kinds of fuel reduction projects like the ones that the city provides, where there is a citizen cost associated with it. So at this point, we'd like to offer answer any questions that you have.
Terrific. Brian, if you can stop sharing your screen, it just helps us all see each other. Perfect. And thank you for the presentation, and we'll open it up to questions from the committee. Councilor Rivera.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just briefly, Porf, can you describe in lay terms what is more dangerous to the community? Large fires that are going from treetop to treetop, or ground fires that are traveling on the ground slowly? And maybe they're both just as dangerous, but can you describe the difference between the two and which is more dangerous to homeowners?
Yeah, certainly, Councilor Rivera, members of the committee. Really, it's that treetop to treetop that we call those crown fires, and is certainly going to be more devastating than something traveling on the surface on the ground. That treetop to treetop makes it very difficult for firefighters and equipment to suppress a fire like that. There's really not much we just as humans can do when the fire is burning through the tops of the trees. Even aviation resources can get out there and put retardant lines on those on that area and try and help pull it back to the ground from the treetops. But sometimes they're even limited because typically when you have that treetop to treetop ignition, those crown fires, the winds are really high, and that really limits the effectiveness and the use of aviation resources as well.
So the closer the trees are together, then the more dangerous it is that correct?
Correct. The density of the trees makes it so that those trees can burn from tree to tree to tree without needing to be on the ground. And so in our recommendations, my recommendations when we're out talking with homeowners is to try and keep trees 10 feet apart from each other, that's still not going to stop a tree from starting the next tree on fire, but it is going to limit how fast it gets from one tree to the next tree. So one tree may burn up, and if it's 10 feet apart from the next one, it's going to take a little bit for that second tree to start up again, and so on and so forth, rather than when they're densely packed and you can't even see see through the trees, then it's as if it's just grass just burning, and they're just burning through the tops of the trees, throwing embers, creating a lot of energy, and making it very difficult to suppress that type of fire.
So I assume like Los Conchas and Pacheco fire, those were probably areas that weren't thinned out very well, that just burned from treetop to treetop. Is that
Correct.
basically what happened there?
Yeah, there was definitely an alignment of factors, like you said, that very dense forests, not a very dry year, high winds that year, I think, over 20 miles an hour, certainly. And the vegetation was just very dry. It looked green, but it was very dry, and it just burned from treetop to treetop. I mean, that fire even burned through the aspen, which typically doesn't burn that way. And it just went through that like it wasn't, lots of times we use aspen stands to stop a fire because it's less volatile fuel and there's more space between the trees. That fire just went right through that like it didn't even blink.
So I think a great sort of way to look at what you're discussing is the watershed. So I remember when I was in the fire department, we went up there, was very thick, very dense. And I think you and your crews and teams and working with other organizations have done a great job of doing some thinning out there, making sure that trees were 10 feet apart and making that area a little bit more healthy and resistant to fires. So can you explain sort of what happened there and really how that affected the McClure fire and really being 7 acres versus something a little more drastic?
Certainly. So the work in the watershed, as you may know, has been ongoing since about 2001. I think the Forest Service signed the environmental impact statement to perform the work out there over the next 5 to 6 years. They did the thinning, cutting, burning, and piling of material, and continue to burn it every year on a broadcast level, which means you're lighting fire across the landscape and letting it burn across the landscape. And after 20 years, I'm happy to say that now you can actually do that, put fire across the landscape in a controlled manner that that wildfire resources are able to manage. And with the continued support and partnership of the city and the governing body, the Forest Service has continued to be able to do that. We have funded about 50% of that work that's been performed up there, and with that has allowed resources and firefighters, when there is a fire up there, to quickly attack that fire and take advantage of that work that's already been done. The McClure fire is actually kind of unique, was outside of that thinning project area, and so what that allowed was just better access for a moment until you got into the thicker stuff. But that fire was actually in the wilderness section, which hasn't been treated. There has been an environmental assessment done from the Forest Service side to treat up there. But since it is wilderness, there's certain limitations on what they can do, which basically means that they can't do anything with any mechanical equipment. You can't really use chainsaws up there. You're not really allowed to put any motorized vehicles up there. And so the plan for up there is to find windows, and with climate change, those windows are getting smaller and smaller, but find windows of time when you could put fire on that landscape and use fire to do the thinning for you without having to use chainsaws. Similar to what they did in Pacheco, which on the Pacheco Canyon project, they lit 500 acres up there just this past spring without any initial thinning or cutting. they let the fire do the thinning work.
And I correct me if I'm wrong, but I think in 2000, our watershed was one of the top 10 most vulnerable areas, I think, that the federal government had sort of determined as a area of need. Where are we now with regards to that?
You know, I don't know where we stand on that. I'm sure we're considerably lower on that list just because of the amount of work that's gone into being up there. You know, the actual physical work of cutting and burning and thinning, as well as all the partnerships that have been raised out of that, those events. You know, the Watershed Association was formed with that, and other events happened. So those are all certainly advantages from that thinning that's been occurring up there.
All right, thank you. And just one final question. You mentioned that during the McClure fire, they used retardant to help deal with that fire. That again runs downstream, and probably remnants of the retardant end up in the water, I assume in the watershed. Can you explain how is that dangerous to the public? Is that something we need to be concerned about?
It certainly is. And I know I've talked with Alan Hook from the Water Division. I know they're working with the USGS office to assess that risk and find out, hey, if a fire burned up there and then we had half an inch of rain, what would that effect be on the reservoirs and on the river channel? How much rain could we expect after a major wildfire to end up compromising those dams up there and causing them to, you know, flood downtown? Essentially, water would, you know, that Santa Fe River coming down Upper Canyon, that community there's certainly plenty of people that live along the floodplain in there. And then, you know, there's certainly places, you know, bridges and things downtown. It would stop the flow of water, certainly get log jammed, and then that water would have to go somewhere, which would, you know, probably be on the streets. You could see a river coming down Water Street, for example, downtown. And so that's certainly something to think about. Those post-fire debris flows, like Brian had mentioned earlier, can, in lots of cases, be more devastating than the actual flames.
Thank you for that. My question was more specific about the retardant ending up in the reservoir or mixed with the reservoir water.
I apologize, Councilor and fellow committee members. Yes, you know, that can be dangerous to the water, to wildlife in those reservoirs. I'd have to ask the Water Division to better understand what that does to filtering it out and their processes. I'm sure it's not good. I know that the Forest Service has worked on trying to keep that retardant away from any type of water body, at least 400 feet away from bodies of water. They do not want to place retardant unless it is absolutely necessary to be sure that, you know, if the value at risk outweighs that possible contamination.
All right, thank you. I'll follow up with the Water Division and see what their take on it is. So thank you for all the work you've done since early 2000s. I again went up to the watershed when it was extremely thick and dense, and have seen it since then, and it's just as beautiful. It's just not as dangerous as it was before. So appreciate all the work that you've done over the years and that you continue to do. And I hope it's easy to find your number and get access to you if people want to do an assessment on their properties. I've had some trouble getting through to the fire department, so I haven't tried you specifically, but I know they have more systems in place, I guess, to try to direct callers, and it hasn't been very user friendly. So I'll have a discussion with the chief about that. later, but I hope you're easy to find if somebody needs you.
Thank you, Counselor. I believe so. My number is 955-3119-3119. Oftentimes I'm not in the office, but if anyone leaves a message there, I get it in my email and I respond within the day.
Great. Thank you, Porfirio. Appreciate it. That's all I have, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Counselor. I have a couple questions. So in supporting the federal legislation, do you all track that? And are you on listservs? And do you advocate? I know periodically we get asked from various groups, not usually internally, but outside groups, to sign letters in support of federal legislation, and they're trying to seek local government support. Do you all come across those opportunities? I'm just wondering how we would go about supporting you and knowing about particular items that might be coming forward and being timely in lending our names and to the causes that would help your strategic efforts in protecting the community.
So Madam Chair, counselors, we don't directly, I certainly don't get listservs directly on specific legislation. Where I've personally been able to leverage from my role is within the specific community at the time was with the state emergency management, where I had an opportunity to meet face to face with the newly appointed FEMA administrator, Brock Wong, and raise this very point about post-fire flooding being this imminent threat immediately following fires, and the importance of being able to provide funding to communities to cover the costs of doing the kinds of things, and not, let's make sure we're not to confuse the actions with mitigation. When you have a fire and you're facing post-fire flooding, the kinds of things that you need to do are obviously to clear the river channels of as much debris so that they don't create those log jams. In some cases, you might actually want to remove a culvert to prevent the culvert from becoming an obstruction. There are opportunities, obviously, to sandbag structures. Certainly, there's opportunities to protect utility heads and wellheads and those types of things. So there are steps that can be taken to ameliorate at least some of the impacts of post-fire flooding. So from my chair, and probably the same is true for Porfirio and others that are in essence worker bees, where we can leverage our influences within the organizations that we have partnerships with, and hope that those messages and those ideas make their way further up the food chain.
So they're not making their way up the food chain at this point.
Well, there was, they amended the fire management assistance grant. And I'll be honest, I think they missed the bullseye, because what they did is they provided funding for mitigation, which happens typically a year or 18 months or 2 years later, planned fuel thinning, rather than the emergency protective measures, which would be taken immediately, and in fact, maybe while the fire is still burning. So,
yeah. Are you familiar with the Little Bear Fire?
very much so.
Yeah, I mean, I had an opportunity to tour that area afterwards, and as I recall, it did have an impact on the water supply in that area, correct?
It did. The debris from the flood runoff contaminated the surface water. It forced the village of Ruidoso to take some immediate steps to reconfigure their water distribution. They actually we used FEMA funding to reimburse them. They rehabilitated some wells that they had up in the forest and ran a pipeline from the wells down to the water treatment plant. They also were drawing water. I don't know if you went down, I'm afraid I don't remember the name of the park, but it's right across from the Ruidoso Fire Station, where they were drawing water. They had actually negotiated an arrangement for the water rights, and they drew water from the stream channel and pumped it back up to the reservoir. So yeah, the Little Bear Fire had a tremendous adverse impact on Ruidoso.
Yeah, that's what I recalled. Okay, well, I think if you come across opportunities where we can be supportive, please let us know.
Oh, absolutely.
And I guess I'll look for other ways to see how those things can be communicated so that we could support those efforts as they become available. Councilor Garcia, did you have anything you wanted to add at this point?
No, Madam Chair. Thank you, Mr. Chavarria and Mr. Williams for the presentation. I really appreciate it.
Great. All right. I don't think we have any other questions. I want to thank you for being here. Very helpful to give that kind of big picture overview and kind of not great, kind of scary, right? So thank you. Thank you for your work. Thank you for being out there working with people as we start to think about these things. And I know you guys have been thinking about them for a long time, so thank you. All right, with that, we will go on to our next presentation. We're going to talk about data. And we have our ABLE Constituent Services Council Liaison, I think is your official title, right?
Yes.
Staff to the Quality of Life Committee. And you, Jennifer Fabian, are going to give us a presentation, and I've lost my agenda, about data. Tell me. Data.
The Santa Fe Data Platform.
The Santa Fe Data Platform. Perfect. Thank you. Take it away.
No problem. Thank you for letting me present. It's fun to be part of the meeting instead of just running it behind the scenes. So thank you so much. So I want to introduce the Santa Fe Data Platform to you all tonight. I think I've mentioned it to a couple of you, but it's nice to get in front of a committee to talk about this. So what is the Santa Fe Data Platform? So this is a one-stop shop for about over 200 metrics. And I want to start by saying that as city leaders, as elected officials, there's, in my mind, three main ways that you can use data and three reasons why using data is so important. And the first is understanding your city, understanding your constituents, which helps you understand unique challenges or unique opportunities that might present itself within your districts, within your city, within our larger community. The second is to execute on promises and to get things done. So when I say this, I mean providing services equitably, targeting services to specific people or the most in need or at risk. And then to identify problems and solve them, both big and small. And then the third reason is to measure and track success or lack thereof. So throughout this presentation, I'm going to kind of hit on those things as we talk about this. So kind of keep that in the back of your mind. So again, it's a shared source of hundreds of metrics to inform public policy, public and private funding decisions and research, and to advance general awareness of community progress. So this was a competitive RFI, and it was awarded to two different companies. The group that convened, and I will talk about who that group is in just a minute, decided to go with two different companies to give us kind of a suite of services at a lower price than we would have with some other options. So we went with MySidewalk and CSource. So MySidewalk is a mix of conventional data sources. So we're talking the census, Bureau of Labor Statistics, housing, HUD. These are publicly available data that is usually very, very hard to get into, decipher, use. Basically, when you want to use them, it is just a massive spreadsheet. And I will show you what this looks like. It is not a massive spreadsheet. And then CSource specializes in this new mobility data. So this is using anonymous cell phone and other device data to track movement, to track mobility. So I will show you some examples of this. This was really spurred on by the tourism department wanting to see our tourism numbers, who's coming in, where they're from, what they do when they're here, stuff like that. So how did the platform come to be? So it started out of the Thornburg Foundation. The project was established over a year ago. This has been a long time coming. Then the Santa Fe Community Foundation joined on as the fiscal host, and Cindy Kahn out of Creative Santa Fe took on project managing. And then they really started building a coalition. And this is when the city of Santa Fe came in, and Quorum St. Vincent, who funded the majority of the public health dashboard. And then we also had additional support from Yawolf, Southwest Care, Con Alma Healthcare Foundation. So it's really a true public-private partnership. It's government, it's nonprofit, it's foundation, and it's public corporate. So it's really a great example of a true public-private partnership project. So why data-driven policy? I hit on this a little bit at the beginning, but Thornburg commissioned a research that revealed 3 common problems faced specifically by policymakers, so you all, and their advisors. Often, we don't know what works to improve outcomes. There's not a lot of study, there's not a lot of evidence out there of what actually improves outcomes. Often, you have other jobs, you have very limited staff, you lack the capacity to undertake effective evidence-based policymaking. And then there's a lack of objective sources out there of evidence to inform the policy process. So underlying all of this is kind of a lack of understanding to pursue solutions to the problems presented here. There's not a lot of people out there getting usable data in the hands of decision makers. So we set out to do that. So what is the platform? It is comprised of 3 different dashboards. The first is the residents and visitors. The second is the public health dashboard. The third is the economy and innovation dashboard. So all the dashboards, I want to note, were developed with equity issues in mind. So wherever possible, we disaggregated by race, by age, by location, by income level, so that we could see across different demographics how these indicators are playing out. There's a lot of overlap among the dashboards. So you'll notice that we don't have an education dashboard, for example, but you will see education indicators throughout the 3 dashboards because they kind of cross these 3 different buckets of data that we have. So the rest of the presentation, I am just going to dig into the platform itself and show you some of the data, how it can be used, and really try to highlight what makes this so cool and why I have enjoyed working on it so much. So this is the homepage. Very easy. You come in, you can click right into the dashboards. Like I said, I'm just going to jump right in. One thing I wanted to notice is we have this spotlight section, and we change these out every couple weeks, usually based on what's going on. So we've been talking about affordable housing a lot, especially in this committee. So wanted to make sure we highlighted some affordable housing data. Obviously, tourism and COVID has been a huge issue. It has been a huge problem. It has been a huge undertaking for you all and everyone in the world, but tourism specifically in Santa Fe. And then, go ahead.
Jen, can I bother you real quick?
Please.
So if I'm general public and I get on the City of Santa Fe website, this comes up as Santa Fe Data Platform?
Yes, you can find it at santafedata.org. Trying to keep it simple. There should be links on the website somewhere. I'd have to dig out where exactly they are buried. Hopefully it will be highlighted in a new website that will be coming online soon, but super easy to find on santafedata.org.
Yeah, I think this is important enough that it should be a link probably on the main page as you Google City of Santa Fe or you bring up the City of Santa Fe main page. So I
Sure.
hope we can get that done.
Yeah, I will talk to Christine about that with the new build.
Thanks. Thank you.
So let's dig into it. So this is on the residents and visitors page. So just looking at number of jobs in the city by industry, you can see obviously we have a huge amount of accommodation and food services. And let me just highlight what we have here. We have Santa Fe, the city is in purple throughout the dashboards. Santa Fe County is in blue. New Mexico is in green, and the US is in this kind of orange yellow color. So it's easy just to come on and look. It's a little bit interactive. So if you just want to look at Santa Fe, you can dim kind of the rest, easy to read, easy to see. And I think this just shows the diversity of our city, what we are doing here, what our main industries are. So that kind of goes to that first reason you might use data, which is understanding the city in which you represent, understanding your constituents. The second one I wanted to highlight is this establishments by number of employees. We are truly a city built on small businesses. We have almost 3,000 small businesses, and small means 1 to 4 employees. If you're looking at actually the definition of small business, I think it's under 100. It's many more than that. So we really are built on entrepreneurs. We have a lot of very innovative people that live and work in Santa Fe, which I think is really, really powerful. Another thing I want to notice while I'm here is this little export button. So basically what you can do is click this and you can export these graphs as a high resolution PNG, SVG, or CSV file, which is great for all of our nonprofits, for all of our people that might want to use these in a report or use these on a social media post. You can easily export the images themselves and the data, which I wanted to make sure I noted for you all. Another indicator that I think just really speaks to our strength of diversity is our immigration and language section. Another thing to note about the dashboard is we have a lot of narration. We have a lot of narrative that explains the data, that talks about why it matters. We wanted this to be a data platform that not just data wonks or very, very data literate people can use. We want this to be something anybody can go in, piddle around, find interesting tidbits that might help them. We understand not everybody works well in graphs, so we try to add in some narration and some actual indicators written out as numbers, essentially. But you can see we have a lot of Spanish speaking. We have it broken out by percent of language spoken at home, which is pretty fascinating. It's about 2/3 of our population speaks English and the rest essentially speak Spanish at home, and then we have a couple others. But we also have some interesting information on the region of origin for our foreign-born residents. It's not surprising, but it is interesting to see. Moving over to the healthcare dashboard, or the public health dashboard, excuse me, looking at our insurance rate, people with health insurance, and I really want to point out the mapping capabilities that we have in this platform. So in this example, we can see which census block groups have the most or the least healthcare coverage. So in this map, red means bad. So down here, kind of in District 3, only 56% of the census block has health insurance. And again, this is kind of getting at where are we targeting services, where are we targeting messages when we're trying to get people to get vaccinated or get tested for COVID. Although those things are free and you don't need health insurance, there might be a correlation between people that have health insurance and people that would be willing to go do that, or that might trust health facilities and healthcare providers. So I think the mapping capabilities are really, really fascinating, and one of the strengths of this platform in relation to others, or when you're just looking at this data in a spreadsheet. Another that I think is really fascinating, especially in Santa Fe, is the seniors living alone. This is a statistics that I don't think a lot of people know exists, but I think it is very, very fascinating, especially when you zoom into our population here. And we have a couple neighborhoods, where we have almost 50% of our population are seniors living alone in kind of these east side neighborhoods, and then even down here, 44%. So again, looking at targeting services, looking at people who might be at risk or at need, it's, I think, a really fascinating map here. And again, when you guys are looking at appropriating funds or appropriating CARES Act, or when you're approving budgets, or when you're finding laws of how to, drafting policy on how to serve, this can be very, very useful. We have a couple disconnected youth statistics about people in school and not in school, and we are looking to expand on our education data and maybe possibly build out a standalone platform, but that is forthcoming. On to affordable housing. So this one is interesting in that it has been a hot topic for a long time in Santa Fe, and especially now. We're looking at the number of renters paying more than 30% of their income on housing. And we have renters and owners, and you can see those numbers are drastically different. But it is interesting to look at our numbers compared to the county, New Mexico, and United States as a whole. This is a problem everywhere. This is not a uniquely Santa Fe problem. But interesting to note. Again, we have mapping. We have some maps of where we have some low-income tax credit properties and qualifications. We have access to internet, which I know we are working on improving this, especially down here, kind of in the south side. I know we have a lot of programming going forward about free internet access for mobile home communities. So again, the mapping I think is really, really great here. This, I think, is the map of the hour. So we have 2019, 2020, and 2021 tourism data, looking at where our tourism numbers are. And this is updated through June. There's about an 8-day lag at the end of the month where we get this. So we should be getting July's numbers in just a couple of days. But you can see we're doing better than last year, but we are not quite up to our 2019 levels yet. So looking at our recovery, looking at how we're going to come out of this, hopefully this does not dip down again because of Delta. So we are maintaining and watching this. And this is something that we get from that C-source data. So this is coming in faster. A lot of the census data takes a lot of time. We still haven't gotten 2020 numbers yet. But the C-source data is pretty much in real time. So we can look and see what people are doing. Another thing I think is really great about our C-source data is we can see where people are coming from. So let's see, this map I think is what really sold the team. This is prior to me joining on C-source. So basically the size of the bubbles represent the number of visitors from that county. So we can see where we're pulling people in from. This is really helpful for hotels and businesses when they're marketing their services, or for Meow Wolf, where are they going to target? We have a lot of Northern Coloradans coming down. We have a lot from Southern California. So looking at marketing and looking at tailoring services to people is really, really great.
How do they know this?
So this is using basically anonymous cell phone data.
Huh.
So it's looking at tracking people when you have your GPS turned on. Your devices know where you are, essentially. And so we're able to collect that. It's 100% anonymous. We don't know who these people are. We can just see basically where they're coming from. And we only have this in the US. We don't have this from abroad.
Huh.
Jumping over, oh, internet is slow, but I think you can see it even though it's loading. Looking at our unemployment rate, this is pretty updated. We have it through basically now through early this year, but you can basically see our unemployment rate was fairly low, jumped up because of COVID. Here's our first spike, here's our second spike, and then we're starting to recover. You can see our recovery coming down. This is the first time I have seen this little dip up. So hopefully that will flatten out again. But again, looking at recovery, looking at COVID, looking at coming out of this pandemic. Related to the pandemic and mental health, we can see how our drug overdoses are doing in our mental health days. So we have, it's a self-reported metric, but it's one used pretty widely, and it's mentally unhealthy days in the past month. And you can see our numbers fluctuate differently than the counties, which isn't a bad or a good thing, but it does prompt some questions. And something that I think this platform does really well is that it might not answer all the questions. It might actually bring up more questions than it answers, because you see this stuff and you just want to know why. Why is this happening? Why are we different? How can we address this? Something I also wanted to point out is we have depression by income and employment. So again, when we're looking at recovery and our economic recovery from COVID, when you're unable to work, or if you've been out of work for a year, your depression rates are a lot higher than if you were employed or retired or a student or otherwise occupied. And so I think our mental health data is a little bit delayed. I think we can expect to see a huge increase in our depression rates when those numbers come in throughout the pandemic, because this is what this suggests. So again, I think just really, really fascinating information. A couple more I want to show you. I'm sorry, there's so much to do, and I am barely scratching the surface here. And just want to put out there, I'm happy to go through this in more detail if you have specific things you want to look at. offline or, in another training. So I wanted to show you our COVID cases. You can see it's our 20 to 50-year-olds that are our biggest spreaders. They are the people getting COVID the most. And although they aren't the most at risk, they are the ones that are getting it and spreading it. And then I want to show you our vaccination data by age group. And it basically shows that those are also the people that are not vaccinated. So the 16, 17, 24, to 40 are kind of our lowest vaccination rates. You can't really count 12 to 15 because it just opened up for them. But so targeting our messaging, how do we get these people to get the vaccine so we can be safe as a community? We do a really good job with our 65 plus because that's that's our biggest at risk. They are dying at the highest rates when they do contract COVID. So again, I think it's an interesting story. You can tell a lot of different narratives with this data. And one thing to note is the data is very much objective. There is no angle here. All of the questions, all of the data that is presented here was decided on by that group of partners. So they basically sat down, outlined what questions do we want answered, which data do we want to present and how. So the data is neutral, but how you use it could not be. So if you see anything that looks fishy, please let us know. We want this to be 100% an accountability tool and a tool for transparency as well. The last thing I wanted to show you all specifically is that we have district geo boundaries, basically geo fences. So we can pull almost all of this data by district. So we can look at each district's population, your median age, how each district is growing or not, your household size, race and ethnicity. And you've seen this before. I sent this to you a very long time ago, but we have launched the full data platform in the meantime, and I think have gotten a couple more indicators from here. So again, we have your districts here disaggregated so that you all, as representatives of a district of the city, can really, really dig into your specific constituency, which I think is really powerful. And again, happy to pull any information you need. We're here as a resource. I'm here to help you. Obviously, that's my role, is to help you all form policy. So that is all I wanted to show you. That's it. It wasn't a lot or anything. So I will open it up for questions, or happy to show you anything else that you might have had a question on.
Great. Am I unmuted? Yes. That I have been wanting to hear more about this, see some of that. So I really appreciate you walking us through, even if it was just scratching the surface. I do have a couple questions, but I'm gonna go to the committee if there are questions from the committee. And oops, gotta. Why? Okay. Sorry. I don't know why my hand thing isn't working tonight. So Councilor Rivera, I think you have a question. Councilor Garcia, I think you have a question. So let's go with Councilor Rivera. I can't see who was first.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Jennifer, for doing this. I was trying to follow you on santafedata.org and was able to do so fairly easily. But when I looked at the City of Santa Fe website and then tried to put in Santa Fe Data Platform or santafedataplatform.org, it didn't bring it up. It didn't bring up anything. So I think that's one thing we need to fix. And if you need help doing that, let me know.
Yes.
The rest of the data, you're right. It takes a while to go through, but it's all very valuable, very well thought out data. And, once I start looking at it and going through it, I'll let you know if I see anything that's a little bit weird. What I did just have a quick question on was one of the last slides you showed was the districts. And when I looked at District 3, and you went through it kind of quick, and I was looking at the city website, so I wasn't able to follow you, or wasn't following you at the time. But can you bring that slide up again, or that
Sure.
data up again?
Yes, and I will note that the district data is not on the platform itself. This is kind of a service that we have built out behind other, I mean, not really behind closed doors. It's available for anybody that might want it. But we have that kind of separate. Let me share my screen. Just because most people don't think in districts. That is unique to you all. And I bet what you were looking at is this. And sorry, that's Hispanic population, regular population.
That and the districts themselves, the outlines
The
I
lines.
guess, of the districts, yeah. So that District 3, I guess, which I assume is in green,
Yes.
and again, I don't know if you can blow it up to see what kind of a road line it follows,
Mhm.
but it didn't look,
Accurate.
yeah.
So we can look at this. It's along, looks like Cerritos.
Yeah, that's what I thought. And really, District 3 currently ends at Hemmage Road,
Okay.
so, which is a little bit over, and I think part of the northern part of District 3, which includes Las Acequias and that area, is part of District 4. And all this is going to change once we get census data. So
Yep.
how easy is it to update the information and change the boundary lines?
Fairly easy. So this is one of our own geofences that we built into my sidewalk. So I will just have to get with, I think it was our data intern out of economic development, Carl. He can go in and change that boundary. So I'll get an updated map. I don't know when this one was created, and I'm sorry I didn't catch that. But I will make sure that that's changed, and we'll update it as soon as the new districting has occurred.
Okay, and great, and clearly you have talents that are very valuable. So if you were gone in the next 2 weeks, who would be available to update the information and make sure that it all stays current and up to speed?
So we have a couple people that work in this system. A couple people in land use work in my sidewalk, but your main contact would probably be Carl. I think his last name is Gammon, and I can get you his info. He just signed a new contract. He's in school currently, but is available to update the data. And then Rich Brown, this is really living in his department. He was the one that worked with Randy Randall to fund a lot of this. They were the city kind of leaders on this. So Rich Brown would also be a lead on this.
Yeah, I really do appreciate it. This is great work and will be extremely valuable. And like I said, if you need help getting it onto the main city webpage, just let us know how we can do that.
Sure. And I also just want to note that we can pull specific reports on specific issues. So if you're passing, a new resolution on affordable housing, I can pull a report specifically on that. You can slap it into the packet. We can include it in the memo, stuff like that. So if you're working on food security, there's a lot of information on that. Or if you're working on aging in place topics, happy to pull in kind of specific reports on what you guys are working on policy wise. That's part of my job as council liaison. So very happy to do that.
And one final thing with being the co-chair of the Health and Safety Task Force and then seeing what Chart's gonna be doing soon, I think with the community dialogue, is that information readily transferable into this data platform?
Do you just mean when they come out with some kind of report, or?
Yeah, so
I'm not quite understanding.
So if we send out a survey, I guess, on what Chart might be asking about, or what Health and Safety Task Force might be asking about, could that data then be put into the platform Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And so I think what we're planning on doing, and my vision for the platform, is to kind of be a one-stop shop for all city data. We are looking at some companion dashboards, not sure if they will live on the same website, but we can certainly cross-reference. I call them sister dashboards or companion platforms, but been talking with Neil Denton on a sustainability platform. We had some suggestions to put in some of our mobility studies embedded. So things we can do is we can embed them directly in. We can add them in the narrative as a link or as a chart. We have a whole page on the homepage of the platform that references other data sources. So we are definitely in the business of collaboration. We want to share. So we have a lot of water and river data. We have a lot of other people that have done great work around data. We link to their pages. We're not trying to monopolize this. It's very much a collaboration. So I know there's some data out of Connect. We're hoping to highlight that on the platform as well. So yeah, anything that comes out, any surveys, we definitely want this to be a one-stop shop.
Well, thank you. Great presentation. Appreciate all your hard work.
Thank you.
Okay, Councilor Garcia.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And the one question I did have, Jennifer, I think you answered it in regards to should we have other topics that are outside of what's being currently populated, we can add that. So that's awesome. Thank
Yeah, and there might be indicators that are publicly available that we just overlooked or didn't think to put in. So feel free to shoot me emails if you're like, I know this data is out there, we want to include it. We can work on that. And then again, very happy to link, to highlight, shout out to other work that people in the city are doing and around the community as well. I mean, we've linked to the Santa Fe Data Hub, which is an older, more education focused data platform. Again, not looking to monopolize this, just trying to create a very accessible tool for the community to use.
Well, I mean, this is a great tool for us. And I think it helps us to make those smart data-driven decisions that we all like to make. And I definitely see myself here digging into this. Definitely tonight, I love reviewing data. So I'm bookmarking this page, and I think this is one that is going to be very much used. And so just thank you so much to you and everybody else that's gone into this project. It's going to be a great resource for us. No other questions, Madam Chair.
Thank you. So just to piggyback on Councilor Garcia's question about can we add stuff? So you said your team or the team asked particular questions and then you sought the data to answer those. So if we had a question, we could ask that question and you could see if the data is available to populate and answer the question. Okay.
Definitely.
Yeah, and I just want to go back to the percentage of people who are vaccinated. Is it possible to overlay data? So to understand what percentage of the population is in each of those age groups, I kind of think would be interesting.
So like percent of total population.
Yeah, so that maybe it doesn't look so bad because most of our population is over X years or something, and that block is, really well represented in the vaccinated population. So, because the way it's laid out there, it looks like, oh my gosh, we haven't vaccinated enough, and of course we still need to vaccinate more, but I'm just curious how it fits into the overall population that we actually have in the city. And I don't know whether that's like too complex for.
No, it's certainly possible. And I think that brings up a great point is we presented the data as cleanly as we thought possible.
Yeah.
And as obvious as you would think, when you look at a graph that's percent of the population vaccinated, we put it out the way that was kind of the most intuitive, but there's certainly other ways to look at data. And there are certainly other ways to look at this information. So I think that type of inquiry is something we could certainly do on the back end. If you wanted to see that, could certainly run the numbers a different way or display the numbers in a different way, disaggregated by a different population and show something more insightful or differently insightful. So I think that's a great point. And again, this is living and breathing. So happy to make those adjustments as we go. Another thing to note is that the census data is updated automatically. As soon as those numbers come out, this whole dashboard will update. We don't have to manually go in and add a year or 10 years. It is all automated. My Sidewalk does that for us. So just wanted to let you know these numbers are always as updated as possible. We have to manually put in some of the C-source data, and we have regular scheduled updates for that data.
Okay, and remind me, C-source is SEA or SEE?
SEE.
SEE, okay. And that would make sense, but just checking, because sometimes people try to get really clever with the name.
Yes.
And then, I'm a little bit concerned about the districts. I can't tell whether District 2 looks the way it should, but it concerns me that District 3 caught the eye of Councilor Rivera. So maybe if you could just check all the districts.
Yes.
And the reason I ask that is that it might depend on which district maps the intern used. And
Yes.
I'll just tell you a story that when I ran the first time, I knocked on doors in a particular neighborhood and they swore they were represented by a different counselor, and it's because the boundaries had changed. So I just wonder if we've used the most up-to-date district map. And for a while, we had the wrong district map on our website. So don't know when that was done, but it just concerns me that, and I think it is an important thing. So I would just ask that you check all the districts and
I
make
will
sure
do
that they're accurately reflected and honestly corrected as soon as possible, just because it is important. So Councilor Rivera, your hand's up again.
Yeah, thank you, Jen. I don't know if you're planning on making this presentation to other committees, but I would welcome it at Public Works and Utilities. If you can work with Jamie, we'd love to have this. I don't mind hearing it again.
Sure.
And I'm sure the other councils would love to hear it as well.
Yeah,
I think-
happy to. And
I think
hopefully we could get some other team members to join. Sadiq Khan and Heather Balas usually do this presentation with me, but they were busy this evening. So it's great to hear their perspective because they've been here the whole time. I'm a new addition to the team, so they have a much more robust history on this project. It has been a long road coming, but a very satisfying project to work on.
Yeah, so please work with Jamie Ray to get you on the next agenda if that's possible. That works with you.
I will check. Thank you, Councilor.
Thanks.
Terrific. Well, thank you. You, as usual, are helping us in many ways, and I'm thrilled that we were able to dive into this and look forward to using it because as has already been said, I think it's going to be very useful. So look forward to that. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
All right, so let's go on. Matters from staff. Do you have any matters?
No matters, Madam Chair.
All right, matters from the committee. No matters from the committee. Matters from the chair. Our next meeting is Wednesday, August 18th. And look forward to seeing you then, but I know we'll see each other before. So thank you. Thanks, everyone. Good night.
Madam
We're
Chair.
adjourned. Yes.
Madam Chair.
Yes,
Sorry,
sorry.
just one last thing.
Yep.
So my family and I were planning a trip to the zoo today, and I looked on my phone real quick at the calendar, and I didn't see any meetings for today. So I think I called you and let you know that there wasn't anything on the calendar with regards to quality of life committee meeting today. So if we can get those out as quickly as possible, so that at least they're on the calendar. So when we start looking, planning our days, planning whatever's going on, that
So-
at least it's there.
Counselor, when you say that it wasn't on the calendar, where were you looking? Because I did call to find out.
Yeah, I was looking at my phone, the Outlook calendar,
Oh, okay.
which is where the Zoom meetings usually pop up, and it wasn't there. So I started. it took
Yeah, we
me
don't-
a few minutes to try to figure out that, hey, we probably have a quality of life committee meeting.
Madam Chair, I
So-
can address that.
Okay, please do.
Councilor Rivera, you are correct. The Outlook calendar went out late. That was an error on my part. Usually Joe schedules them out in advance and that had expired. I think he had them 6 months out. So I will get Joe to schedule them out for the rest of the year, hopefully, and then just get them on your calendars now so that it's there. So I apologize that that didn't get out to everybody until this morning.
Yeah, no worries. It wasn't a big deal. Just, want to make sure that, it's there before I plan something or do something else. So, thank
Yeah,
you.
no, for sure. We don't want you missing trips to the zoo. That would be bad because those are fun.
It was fun. It was fun. Hot, but fun.
Yeah, no, often hot for sure. All right. Yeah, I was just confused about how that works. So thank you for Councilor Rivera for flagging it. And thank you, Jennifer, for identifying the problem so we can fix it. Okay, so with that,